Most car racers will tell you their biggest fear is fire. For motorcycle racers, that fear is spinal injury. Either way, when worst fears become harsh reality, racers often demonstrate to me an inspiring ability to overcome. Mel Kenyon, badly burned at Langhorne, 65, contrived a special glove with which to work the steering wheel and went on to win 7 USAC championships and race until he was 76 years old. From the two-wheeled world, motocrosser David Bailey, confined to a wheelchair after an '87 crash, became one of the world's best wheelchair athletes. And 3-time world road racing champion Wayne Rainey, paralyzed in '93, has taken on the task of breathing new life into American road racing. The important thing these men have in common is their steadfast refusal to allow their lives to be defined by their injury. And there is no better example of that than this week's guest. Mitch Payton, a teenage bike racer when a California desert crash put him in a wheelchair, from the seat of that chair, has built the most successful team in the history of American motocross.
To race, you have to believe you're going to win.
I can't picture my life without drag racing.
I will do anything it takes to win at any time.
You didn't want me behind you when the 2-lap card came out.
Do the best every single time.
And that side-by-side, 300-mile-an-hour rock and roll, ground shaking.
One move inside, outside, and the game's over.
Everybody needs to have the feeling of the win in their heart, or they're going to give up and quit.
Hi, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure and an honor to have Mitch Payton here. Great to renew the friendship after so long a time. Thanks for coming.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Let's dispense with the unpleasant part right off the top, get rid of it, be done with it. Tell me when and how you were hurt.
I raced desert in, pretty much all my life. I rode a little bit of motocross and rode off-road. And when I was 17, I was in a desert race up in California City, and I went down a hill, and it was really, really steep, and kind of lost riding it down. Engine was dead, and just kind of lost control a little bit. Feet went off and started gaining speed going down the hill, and then the hill didn't go down to where there was runoff. It crossed a Jeep path, like a little road, and I just hit the other side, flew off the bike, landed in a pile of rocks, and next thing I knew, I woke up and thought I was just knocked out. And when I woke up, every time I'd knocked the wind out of myself, like usually I would pick my knees up, and put my knees up, and I'd be like, oh, and when I
wait for it to come back.
just catch a breath. And when I looked down, my legs were flat, and in my mind they were up. And I'm like, man, that's not good.
Oh,
so
you knew.
So something wasn't so good, and then they pulled my boot off, and they said, try to, move your feet, try to wiggle my toes, and they said, they're not moving. So I'm like, wow, not good.
What amazes me is that in little more than a year's time, you were a teenager, and in a little more than a year's time, you went through the rehab, you made the decision you were just going to get on with your life, your family bought a motorcycle shop, and you just go and don't seem to miss a lick. What was the mindset through that? Well,
it was, when you're first hurt like that, there's a lot of things, like you think of the bad, you think of all the bad things for sure, and then you try to think of, like, there's a way out of this, it's got to be a way to turn this around. Like, I wish I could replay this thing.
How do I undo this?
How do I undo this, or how do I make it okay? And like every other time, like if the doctor tells you broke something, like it's like 8 weeks, you're okay. And they're trying to tell you, like, this is a different deal, it's not a broken bone, we know what we're talking about. And then they start really talking to you, and then by the time that they're trying to tell you, they're like, you're taking this pretty good. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm gonna be okay. And then they're like, we're not so sure about that. So I dealt with that, and then I really I went through a phase where, like, I had 1 semester of school to go, and I told the guy I want to get straight A's. I'd never done it, so I thought it'd be kind of cool to do it, and I did that, got straight A's, and then I was done with high school. And then I wanted to be around racing. That's all I really cared about. So I wanted to figure a way I could do it, and I had a little money, not enough to buy a dealership. My parents took a second on their house. We looked around for some dealerships, and we found it was the shop that I actually rode for, and it was a small shop. And the guy wanted to sell it, and my parents helped me buy it, and I lived at home. I took $50 a week for gas, and I was 18 years old in a wheelchair selling Huskies.
You went on to become, in Jody Weisel's estimation, Motocross Action magazine, he calls you the greatest tuner in motocross history. And he says part of that is because you insisted on trying to take slow bikes and make them fast. But I like this. He was at Saddleback Park, and you had a 125, and it blew up. And he says, quote, Mitch couldn't just catch a ring in a port or seize quietly. He had to have shrapnel, smoke, and pyrotechnics. And I'm wondering if that's a fair assessment. Are you a shrapnel, smoke, and pyro kind of guy?
Well, I was kind of hell-bent on making a 125 Husky really fast. And they were like probably the slowest bike. And I just kept working on it and working on it and working on it. And then it was getting more unreliable the more I would do, so I would just change parts sooner, and then it would be okay. And then I never thought it was possible, but it started breaking rods, and when it broke a rod, it would saw the cases in half, and then you'd have to throw away everything and start over. So,
and that would be a pretty spectacular and noisy moment, I presume.
It was noisy and smoky, and it was bad. Yeah, no, it wasn't good.
When we come back, we're going to tackle the question of Pro Circuit becoming a household name, Roger DeCoster calling, and which graduate of this guy's racing team is the greatest of all time. Stay tuned. Welcome back. We're talking with Mitch Payton about the evolution of Pro Circuit, which became the most successful team in motocross history. Your specialty was engine tuning, wizard at grinding ports and breaking rods. You expanded into exhausts, and is that where the Pro Circuit name started? Did it go back further than that?
Yeah, maybe. We were already doing stuff because we were Anaheim Husqvarna, and we had a line of products like pipes and porting and some suspension mods, and we didn't think other Husqvarna shops would carry something from another Husqvarna shop. So we had to come up with a name, Pro Circuit.
And you go on from that to expanding into the engine business. Next thing you know, you're actually building the engines for factory Honda for the 125s. It seems like a really fast track, and I'm wondering how much of it was a plan and how much of it was just sort of reacting and making it up as you went along.
Part of it was maybe, honestly, a little bit of luck, because I spent so much time kind of not being known, working on Huskies, to where it was Jody's idea, where he said you should try to build some of the Japanese stuff, and see what you can do with that. And I'm like, well, no one's going to buy anything for them. They're already pretty good. That was, my philosophy was wrong. So like, he convinced me into finally building like a 125 Honda pipe, and there was more of those sold than all the Huskies combined. And all of a sudden, we sold, so many Honda 125 pipes, and I was like, wow, imagine if we'd made a pipe for everything. And that's where we started kind of trying to do that.
And that sort of made the brand popular among big-name riders. It also caught the attention of a guy named Roger DeCoster, who at the time happened to be running the Honda motocross program. And he suggested that maybe you should expand from just supplying them engines to running the whole team. Was it easy or hard to say yes to that?
Well, I think Roger kind of got to where, like, when I first met him, he wanted to try one of the pipes, years before, and I had never met him, so like, I brought this pipe, and I got to go meet Roger and let him ride it, and, well, what do you think? And he goes, it's really good. And I'm like, wow, that's great, that's good. And I said, hey, I got...
Blessing of the man.
And I'm like, hey, I got a motor too. Would you like to ride that? And he's like, yeah. So unloaded a bike, put the pipe back on that bike, and he rode that, and he's like, that's really good. So I think he kind of trusted me a little bit from that point. And at the end of 1990, Dave and Roger talked to me and asked me if I'd be interested in running the team. And I told them if we could try to find a sponsor, like I couldn't afford to do it without, and just everything kind of worked out, and That's what started, like the sort of satellite programs again was, like we had Peak Antifreeze and Split Fire Spark Plug, which was the same company, and they sponsored the team, and Honda supplied bikes and parts, and off we went.
And the rider was Jeremy McGrath. So who gets credit for discovering McGrath?
Honda gets credit for that because they already had Jeremy signed to ride for Honda. And then they changed their direction and said, we're going to do this satellite team. And I think at first, you probably could ask Jeremy or his father. I don't know that they were so excited about it, in the beginning because
wait a minute,
they were
I'm gonna ride with this guy.
we signed a factory Honda deal, and now you're saying I'm going to ride for this shop, and so like it took us to win over the parents and make sure that they were comfortable with what we were doing. And then after they rode the bikes, and we tested our bike versus the year before's factory Honda bike and all that stuff, and they rode ours like the first day we did, and they said, we don't need that one no more. We don't bring it out.
Nice.
So everybody was happy. It was a really good mood, and it was fun.
And then you switched. The Honda deal turned into Kawasaki, and one of the remarkable things about that has been the ongoing relationship with Team Green, which is the amateur program. But what strikes me is that first you win Jeremy McGrath's heart and launch his career, and next comes this little redhead kid named Ricky Carmichael, who goes on to become the greatest of all time. That designation doesn't exactly satisfy one guy.
I don't like the GOAT nickname, and I've told him that. He's not the greatest of all time in my book because he's not the greatest Supercross rider. I am.
Mitch Payton, you brought both of those guys into the big leagues. Obviously, they're going to have that difference of opinion forever, and you and I aren't going to settle it. What I'd like to know from you is, what was it about each of those guys that made them a contender for that claim?
I would say when Jeremy was young, like I remember him absolutely just wanting and waiting for the first race, and we wanted all their names on the helmets to be the same, and he wanted showtime. And I'm like, oh my gosh, showtime. But he really truthfully liked riding in front of people. He liked the lights. He liked Supercross, and he couldn't wait. He was absolutely like a racehorse ready to go for Supercross. And if you were going to beat him in a series, you had a lot of work to do because he's not going to give it to you. And the opposite, like when you take Carmichael, one of the things that was pretty gnarly about Ricky was, I think he was always better outdoors, and in Supercross he was great at it, but he worked hard at it too, to be that efficient indoors. But what made Ricky so phenomenal was just his pure hatred for losing. Yeah, he liked winning, but losing, it wasn't the fact that somebody else won, it's that he lost. He just couldn't handle that. They're just amazing, you're always constantly looking for something McGrath had or something that Ricky had.
Wow, well said. Take a commercial break, come back on the other side with some of your questions for Mitch Payton. Welcome back. We're talking with Mitch Payton, who was pretty roundly accepted to be the two-stroke tuning genius just at the time that your chosen sport decided, let's race four strokes. How'd that work? How'd that sit with you?
I wasn't very happy about that, honestly, because, I spent, years trying to get to where we could efficiently do everything on the two strokes in-house, and then they decide that we're gonna, ride a four-stroke. And I kind of avoided it as long as I could. And
back to the denial thing.
Yeah, I denied it. Like it was going to go away. They were going to pose rules to protect the two-stroke. They were going to implement something to make this to where it wasn't a runaway. And then pretty soon I realized they weren't going to do anything, and it was a runaway. And then pretty soon we're going to have a 4-stroke within 7 months. And I'm like, we got to get our act together. Like, there's a lot here besides throwing stuff at it. So we went upstairs and we had busted apart a Yamaha and a Honda 450. And I had called this friend of mine, Drino Miller. And
Wow.
And Drino had just been an
Toyota guy for years and years.
And so I said, I'm going to call him and ask him to come down and tell me what he thinks about these engines, and he's looking at them, and I'm like, well, what do you think? What can we do? And he's like, they're pretty good. They're, for a 4-stroke engine, these are pretty good engines. And I'm like, no, we need to make them better. So like, what are we going to do? So he's like, well, there's a lot of stuff here, and I'm like, would you consider coming down and working for us for a while? And he's like, to do what? And I'm like, teach us what you think is the proper approach to going after the development of this 4-stroke. And I said, we want to learn, all the nuances that you think that we need to do. And I don't have a lot of time to fail. I want to be good. I want to be on fire in 6 months. So we had some procedures and stuff like that he brought that we still utilize. We use a lot of the stuff that Drino had taught us, and the reason I wanted Drino was I wanted a guy that I thought had seen everything. I thought it was a set of eyes that could, give us experience without us having so many failures. And we had failures, but he was pivotal for us to be successful in 4-strokes.
That success story, the numbers, more than 240 race wins, 26 championships, they're both records, maybe records forever, but what's still out there that appeals to you as a challenge, a potential conquest?
I think it's the same thing that drives probably everybody, and that is like we've been lucky, we've been fortunate, we've had a lot of success, but then as soon as you don't have success, everybody talks smack on you. Like last year in Supercross, we were sweeping podiums, leading the points, and we didn't win the series. So it's not easy. It's not easy to replicate again. And yet I'm happy for other teams that they got a little success too. Like, they need to be successful. Everybody needs to have the feeling of the win in their heart, or they're going to give up and quit. That hasn't left me, and I want to win, and I want to keep building stats. I think we have the best motorcycle on the track, and our goal is to try to attract the best talent. But still doesn't mean you're going to win. You got to have a little luck too.
Good stuff. At this point, I think we should go to the fans. We've got our Carlisle Tool fan question of the week. What is the easiest and hardest thing about running a race team? Ryan Garst wants to know.
Personalities, for sure. The bigger the team gets, you have more staff and all that, and sooner or later everybody has an opinion, and you want to allow them to speak their mind and have their opinion. But then there's a day where you've got to move forward, and if you're going to run the team, then you better be the general and say, enough, we're doing it this way. And then it's hard to take somebody that comes to the team, and if you don't really know them very well, and try to embed yourself into their program, and if they're struggling, figure out what you can do to turn that, and is it the training or is it the riding? And then what are you going to do to what can we do to make them faster?
Let's take a commercial break. We'll be back on the other side to find out what makes this guy most proud. Welcome back. Time to wrap up our conversation with Mitch Payton, who's accomplished so much in the world of motocross. We ask everybody the same final question. Of all the things that you've done in your life, racing or otherwise, what makes you the most proud?
God, I think it's a pretty big list.
Oh, we have a little time.
No, I was proud of some of the things that I did, but I wouldn't put them at the top anymore. I'm proud of my parents, my brother, proud of my wife and my kids. I got 2 little boys, and they're riding now, and I'm super proud of those guys. That's probably, I'd say, if I got to give up everything, I'll just take that and have to peel off in the sunset. So with all that, I would say the family probably the most. If we go into the racing aspect of it, I would for sure put the successes of others as way bigger than mine, because mine was pretty small. But what makes me really happy is I've tried to still keep in good graces with all those guys as they've moved on, and then when they're done, like, they come back and they visit and they care, and they're proud about what they did for me, and I'm really proud of what they did.
I think the only thing I disagree with in there is your comment that your contributions were pretty small. On the contrary, your contributions made all that happen.
I appreciate it.
Congratulations.
All right.
Thanks for being here.
Thanks.
In fact, in closing, I would elaborate a bit on that. Motocross and Supercross have evolved pretty dramatically since 1978, when this guy suffered his fateful crash in the California desert. Today, independent teams, fully sponsored, well-equipped, routinely contend for championships. They're run by entrepreneurs as dissimilar as Coach Joe Gibbs and the motocross GOAT, the greatest of all time, Ricky Carmichael. The prototype for that business model? That would be Payton's 1991 Peak Antifreeze team. And while racing disciplines from IndyCar to MotoGP try to structure the right ladder system to develop new talent, Payton's Pro Circuit team has for years provided the perfect stepping stones by which aspiring stars climb from the amateur nationals to the doorstep of factory rides. Along the way, Pro Circuit riders have won more races and championships than any of their competitors. These are impressive achievements for a guy whose own climb to success began as a teenager with that porting tool that turned underpowered Husqvarnas into shrapnel smoke and pyrotechnics. 2 words then sum it all up. Thanks, Mitch. I'm Dave Despain. Thanks to you for watching. We'll see you next week.